Following his brother's tragic car accident, a man heartlessly throws his frail elderly father and vulnerable teenage nephew out of their home. Forced to survive on the streets for weeks, their situation seems hopeless until a shocking twist changes everything. Simon always felt like an outsider in the family. While Alfred was the legitimate son, loved by his late mother during his childhood, Simon was the illegitimate child, a constant reminder of betrayal, always mistreated by Alfred's mother. The brothers only shared their father, Anthony, but that wasn't enough to create a brotherly bond between them. One evening, Alfred and Simon were in the living room, just another ordinary night. Alfred, trying to be friendly, asked, "Do you want to play some chess, Simon?" Simon looked at Alfred, his eyes reflecting years of resentment. "Why do you care? You've never wanted to be my real brother." Alfred sighed, feeling the weight of the words. "I know Mother wasn't fair to you, but we can't change the past. We could at least try to be friends." Simon looked away, anger mixed with deep sadness. "Shut up. You'll never understand what it's like to be treated like an outsider in your own home." Alfred moved closer, placing a hand on Simon's shoulder. "I don't want it to be like this. We are family, Simon. For Father's sake, who is already old, can we at least try to have peace at home, without fights?" The silence between them was heavy, a silent truce. Their relationship was marked by these moments, small attempts to get closer, quickly passing due to the scars of the past. Simon often took refuge in solitude, while Alfred, the pillar of the family, despite all efforts to take care of the household responsibilities, care for the father and the son, felt the invisible barrier between him and his brother. Anthony, watching from afar, felt immense guilt. He knew the dynamic between his sons was a result of his own choices. At night, he tried to talk to Simon. "Son, I know I made mistakes. I know I wasn't the father you needed." Simon, with eyes full of pain, responded, "You never fought for me. You always left me aside for her, for them. There's no way to recover what has passed." Anthony lowered his head, speechless. The truth was harsh, and reconciliation seemed like a distant dream. The relationship between Simon and Alfred was complicated, full of hurt and attempts at reconciliation, where every misstep was a fight, deepening the divide. They shared blood, but the emotional ties were worn, always on the brink of breaking. One day, Alfred was returning home after a long day at work. The night was dark and rainy, making the roads slippery and treacherous. As he drove, he thought about his elderly father, who was getting weaker every day, and his son, who was growing up too fast. But the thought that tormented him the most was Simon's words and the failed attempts at reconciliation. "I wish he could understand me," Alfred murmured, lost in his thoughts. Suddenly, a car appeared out of nowhere, swerving into his lane. Alfred tried to steer away, but it was too late. The impact was violent, and the sound of metal crunching echoed through the deserted road. In seconds, Alfred's car was destroyed, and he lay unconscious among the wreckage. When the news reached the family, the shock was devastating. Anthony, still fragile from the loss of his wife, fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "It can't be true. Not my son," he sobbed, his voice echoing through the empty house. Simon, upon hearing the news, was paralyzed. He felt a mix of emotions he couldn't describe: guilt, sadness, anger. "It can't be. I never even had the chance to truly apologize," he thought, as tears welled up in his eyes. Luke, only 13, could barely process what was happening but tried to be strong. "Grandpa, what are we going to do now, without Dad?" he asked, his voice trembling. Anthony, also trying to be strong for his grandson, hugged him tightly while crying. "I don't know, but we'll find a way, Luke." At the funeral, the atmosphere was heavy and silent. Friends and family gathered to pay their respects, but the emptiness left by Alfred was palpable. Simon stayed at a distance, watching, feeling like an outsider. "I should have made peace. I should have tried harder," he thought, watching Luke and Anthony weeping as they saw the coffin being lowered into the grave. After the funeral, Anthony and Luke returned to a house that now felt enormous and desolate, without the pillar of their lives, the man of the house. Simon watched them from afar, feeling the weight of his decisions, and the gravity of the loss. "I need to do something. Now it's up to me to take charge. I can't let this destroy what's left of our family," he decided, feeling the urgency to change his behavior. But at that moment, the sadness was overwhelming, and the future seemed uncertain and dark for everyone. The house was engulfed in silence, a silence that spoke of sadness and loss. Anthony spent his days sitting in the chair in the living room, staring into space. The death of Alfred, combined with the loss of his wife, had plunged him into a deep depression. He could barely get up, barely speak. "Dad, you need to eat something," insisted Simon, placing a bowl of soup on the table next to his father. Anthony didn't respond, just continued staring ahead. "Aren't you listening, Dad?" said Simon impatiently. Luke, on the other hand, was lost. At 13, he found himself without a father and a mother, lost in a world that seemed unfair and cruel. "Uncle Simon, I miss Dad so much," said Luke, tears in his eyes, hugging a photo of Alfred. Simon sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I know, Luke, I miss him a lot too. But we have to be strong now, think about the future." However, taking care of his father and nephew was not as easy as Alfred made it seem. Simon felt overwhelmed, trapped in a situation he never wanted. "Why did this have to happen? Did he die to affect me?" he murmured to himself as he tried to balance his work and new family responsibilities. One night, after an exhausting day, Simon heard sobs coming from Luke's room. He entered and found the boy crying. "I can't sleep, Uncle Simon. I have nightmares about Dad." Simon sat next to him. "I know it's hard, Luke, but you can't cry your whole life. You're strong, just like your dad was. Act like a man." Each day that passed, the situation seemed more desperate. Anthony sank deeper into his depression, and Luke clung to any hope of normality. Simon, who ended up taking on Alfred's responsibilities as the man of the house, was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, trying to keep everything in order. But the burden was becoming unbearable. He didn't have natural leadership skills. "I can't do this alone," thought Simon, frustration growing inside him. He knew he needed to find a solution, something that could make him feel fulfilled. The tension in the house was sad. Sleepless nights and the weight of responsibilities began to erode Simon's patience. He felt suffocated, unable to see a way out of the situation. On one particularly difficult night, a heated argument erupted in the living room. "You don't understand, Dad. I can't keep going like this, suffocated by responsibilities for a family that never paid attention to me, a family I never wanted. I didn't ask for this," Simon shouted, his voice echoing through the walls as he threw things against the wall. Anthony, with a vacant look, tried to understand his son's frustration. "Simon, we're all suffering, but you can't just give up on us," Anthony replied, his voice weak and laden with sadness. Luke, scared by the intensity of the fight, tried to intervene. "Uncle Simon, please don't fight with Grandpa. We're trying our best." But Simon was beyond his limit. "Trying our best? It's not enough, kid. I can't keep this up. I'm not going to dedicate my life to people like you. I need space. I need peace. Now that the family's favorite isn't here to boss around, you want to live off me? No way." The desperation in Simon's voice was evident, and Anthony, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, tried to stand up, but his weakness made him fall back into the chair. "Simon, please think about what you're saying. This family has always been yours too." The anger and stress reached a breaking point. "No, Dad, you need to leave. I can't give my life for you. I can't carry this burden. You need to get out of this house. Now I'm in charge here." Those words shocked Anthony and Luke. Luke, helpless and with tears in his eyes, clung to his grandfather. "Where will we go, Grandpa? We have nowhere to go." Anthony looked at Simon, the pain and disappointment clear on his face. "Simon, we are your family. Don't do this to us." But Simon, blinded by the pressure and ambition to free himself from responsibilities, stood firm in his decision. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things and leave. This house is mine now." The night passed slowly, every minute heavy with tension and sadness. Anthony, too weak to fight, and Luke, with no options, began to pack what little they had. Luke, sobbing, packed the few memories he had left of his father. The next morning, Simon watched as Anthony and Luke walked out the door, carrying heavy bags of sadness and desolation. The house, now silent, did not offer the peace he expected. Instead, emptiness and guilt began to settle in his heart. He knew he had made a drastic decision, but wasn't sure if it was the right one. As he watched them leave, a feeling of regret began to grow inside him. The first days on the streets were a nightmare for Anthony and Luke. Without money, food, shelter, or any resources, each day was a desperate struggle for survival. The first night was particularly cold. Huddled in an alley, Anthony tried to keep Luke warm with the little they had. "Grandpa, I'm so cold," said Luke, trembling, his eyes full of fear and tears. Anthony hugged him tighter, trying to protect him from the biting wind. "Hang in there, my boy. Tomorrow will be a better day," said Anthony, though he doubted his own words. The next morning they woke with the first rays of the sun, but the light brought no comfort. "We need to find something to eat, Luke. Let's look around," said Anthony, getting up with difficulty. They walked the streets, facing curious and sometimes disdainful looks. Luke's stomach growled with hunger. "Grandpa, there's a bakery over there. Can we ask for something?" Luke pointed to a small bakery across the street. Anthony hesitated, but necessity outweighed pride. "Let's try," he replied. They entered the bakery and were greeted by the owner, a stout, middle-aged man. "What do you want?" he asked with a suspicious look. Anthony took a deep breath. "Sir, we're going through a tough time. Could you spare some food?" The man eyed them for a moment before picking up 2 old loaves of bread. "Here, it's all I can offer," he said, handing over the bread reluctantly. "Thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much," said Anthony, feeling a mix of relief and humiliation. While they ate sitting on a park bench, Luke looked at Anthony. "Are we going to stay like this forever, Grandpa?" Anthony held his grandson's hand. "No, Luke, we'll find a way out. I promise we'll get through this together." But the promise was hard to keep. The following nights were equally tough. They slept wherever they could, under bridges or in dark corners of the city. With each passing day, Anthony's health deteriorated. He coughed constantly and felt increasingly weak. "Grandpa, you're sick, we need help," said Luke, worried, on a particularly difficult night. Anthony, trying not to show the severity of his condition, replied, "I'm fine, Luke. I just need a little rest." But Luke knew his grandfather was lying. The situation was becoming unbearable. They needed a miracle to get out of that misery. And so, as night fell once again, Luke made a silent prayer, hoping that the next day would bring some hope. And so it continued. The days turned into a routine of survival for Anthony and Luke. Each morning they rose from the makeshift shelter they had found the night before, an old abandoned building, and prepared for another day of struggle. Hunger was a constant presence, a painful reminder of their new reality. "Come on, Luke. We need to find something to eat today," said Anthony, trying to hide the fatigue in his voice. Luke, despite his youth, showed an unexpected determination. "I'll look in the dumpsters behind the restaurants, Grandpa. Sometimes they throw away food that's still good." Danger was a constant on the streets. One night, while they slept under a bridge, they were awakened by a group of noisy teenagers. "Hey, look at these two. Luxury bums, huh?" mocked one of them, kicking the few things Anthony and Luke had. "Please leave us alone," pleaded Anthony, shielding Luke with his body. The teenagers laughed and, after a few minutes of taunting, left. "Grandpa, why are they like that?" asked Luke, fear in his eyes. Anthony sighed. "Some people don't understand what it's like to need help, but we'll get through this, I promise." The search for food became a daily adventure. One time, Luke found a bakery that threw away bread from the previous day. "Grandpa, look what I found," he exclaimed, smiling, holding a bag full of bread. Anthony smiled, relieved to see his grandson happy, even if just for a brief moment. The cold nights were the worst. Anthony began to feel the effects of constant exposure to the cold and dampness. "Grandpa, you're coughing a lot today. We need to find a warmer place to sleep," said Luke, worried. "I'll be fine, Luke. We need to focus on finding food and safety," replied Anthony, though he knew his health was worsening. During the day, they approached churches and community centers seeking help. "Do you have a place to stay for the night?" Anthony asked, hope in his voice. Sometimes they received a blanket or a hot meal, but more often they were turned away with empty promises. Encounters with other homeless people were also common. Some of these people offered valuable advice. The train station has a temporary shelter. You should try there, suggested a middle-aged man with a friendly smile. Thank you, we'll try that, replied Anthony, grateful for the unexpected kindness. Despite all the hardships, the bond between Anthony and Luke grew stronger. They learned to support each other, to find strength in the small daily victories. We'll make it, Grandpa. No matter what, we'll get through this together, said Luke, holding his grandfather's hand firmly. As the darkness of night fell again, bringing more challenges and uncertainties, hope persisted. Anthony knew that no matter how difficult it was, they had to keep fighting. And so, once again, they fell asleep, with the promise that tomorrow might bring a new beginning. Anthony's condition worsened each day. His cough had become constant, and he could barely stand. Luke, desperate, realized he needed to do more to help his grandfather. One day, while Anthony was sleeping, he made a difficult decision. I'm going to find help, Grandpa. Don't worry, I'll be back soon, whispered Luke, trying to sound more confident than he felt. With a heavy heart, he went out into the busy streets, determined to find some kind of assistance. Luke walked along the sidewalks, looking at the hurried faces passing by. He felt small and invisible, but he knew he had to try. He chose a busy spot near a cafe and began asking for help. Please, can someone help me? My grandpa is sick, and we need food and medicine. Most people rushed by, avoiding eye contact. Some cast pitying glances but didn't stop. Luke felt his discouragement growing, but he didn't give up. He continued, his voice becoming hoarse from begging. Sir, can you please help me? My grandpa is very sick, he said to a well-dressed man who had just left the cafe. The man looked at Luke for a moment, shook his head and kept walking. Luke felt tears welling up in his eyes. Then a middle-aged woman stopped and approached him. What's wrong, child? Where is your grandpa? She asked, her voice full of concern. Luke, relieved that someone had finally stopped, quickly explained the situation. He's lying in an alley around the corner. He's very sick and I don't know what to do. The woman, named Mary, frowned and made a quick decision. Come with me. Let's go get your grandpa and take him somewhere safe. Together they ran to where Anthony was lying. Mary knelt beside him, checking his condition. We need medical help. I'm calling an ambulance, she said, pulling out her phone. While they waited for the ambulance, Mary spoke to Luke. You were very brave to ask for help, Luke. We'll make sure your grandpa gets the care he needs. Luke, with tears of relief streaming down his face, thanked her repeatedly. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics began treating Anthony. He has pneumonia. We need to get him to the hospital immediately, said one of the paramedics. Mary held Luke's hand. I'll come with you to the hospital to make sure he's taken care of. Don't worry, everything will be okay. As the ambulance drove away, Luke felt a spark of hope. For the first time in days, it seemed like things might get better. He looked at Mary, feeling deep gratitude. Thank you for helping us, he said, his voice trembling. Mary smiled at him. We're in this together. We'll make sure you and your grandpa are okay. And so, as the ambulance sped off, the future seemed a little less bleak for Luke and Anthony. With Anthony hospitalized and receiving medical care, Luke found himself alone on the streets again, now seeking resources to ensure his grandfather could recover properly. Each day was a new journey, full of unpredictable encounters with people of all kinds. Early in the morning, as Luke approached a convenience store, he spotted a tired-looking woman carrying several bags. Excuse me, ma'am, can you help me? My grandpa is in the hospital and we need help to eat, he said, his voice hopeful. The woman looked at him, her eyes full of compassion, and handed him a bill and some coins. Take good care of your grandpa, boy. I hope he gets better soon. Thank you, ma'am, I appreciate it very much, Luke replied, feeling a temporary relief, but not everyone was so kind. A bit later, while trying to ask for help in a park, he was confronted by a rude man. Go get a job, kid. Stop bothering people, the man said, shoving Luke away. Luke fell to the ground, scraping his knee. With tears in his eyes, he got up, determined not to give up. In the afternoon, Luke came across a group of teenagers sitting on a bench, laughing and talking. He hesitated, but his need was greater than his fear. Hi, could you guys help me with some money or food? My grandpa is very sick, he asked, trying to sound brave. The teenagers stopped laughing, and one of them with blue hair and piercings stood up. "Hey guys, let's help the kid." They pooled some money together and handed it to Luke. "Thank you so much, really," said Luke, surprised by the unexpected generosity. "No problem, man. I hope your grandpa gets better," replied the blue-haired teen, giving him a pat on the shoulder. At the end of the day, Luke approached a bakery where he had received help before. The owner recognized him, and without Luke needing to ask, handed him a bag of fresh bread. "Here, kid, take this to your grandpa, and if you need more, come back tomorrow." Luke felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, sir. You don't know how much this helps." He left the bakery, his eyes shining with renewed hope. Back at the hospital, Luke found Mary waiting for him. "I got some things, Mrs. Mary. How's Grandpa?" he asked, anxious. "He's stable, Luke. You're doing a great job. Keep being strong," Mary said, hugging him. Each encounter on the streets taught Luke a new lesson about human kindness and cruelty. He knew that despite the challenges, he had to keep fighting. For himself, for his grandfather, and for a better future. Despite the initial medical care, Anthony's health began to deteriorate rapidly. Life on the streets had left deep marks on his already weakened body. Lying in the hospital bed, Anthony coughed constantly, his breathing heavy and irregular. Luke watched with growing despair as his grandfather withered before his eyes. "Grandpa, please try to eat a little," begged Luke, holding a spoonful of soup. Anthony tried to smile, but the weakness was evident. "I'm trying, my dear. I'm trying," he replied, his voice barely audible. Mary, who was at the hospital, tried to comfort Luke. "The doctors are doing their best, Luke. We need to have hope." Luke nodded, but the sadness in his eyes was unmistakable. "What if it's not enough? What if I lose Grandpa, too?" Luke's voice broke and tears started to flow. Mary hugged the boy. "We won't give up. We'll do everything we can to help your grandpa." The days became an endless agony. With each visit to the hospital, Luke hoped to see some improvement, but the news only got worse. "The pneumonia is advancing rapidly. We need medications that we don't have available here," said one of the doctors, his face serious. Desperate, Luke went back to the streets begging for help. "Please, can someone help me? My grandpa is very sick." The responses ranged from indifference to small acts of kindness, but it was never enough. Each no was a blow to Luke's heart. One night, upon returning to the hospital, Luke found Anthony in an alarming state. He was pale, sweating, and struggling to breathe. "Grandpa, hold on. I'm here with you," said Luke, gripping his grandfather's hand tightly. Anthony opened his eyes and tried to speak, but the words failed. He just squeezed Luke's hand, conveying all the love and regret he felt. Mary entered the room, alarmed by the scene. "Luke, we need to get the doctors now!" She ran to get help, and soon a team came in, trying to stabilize Anthony. Luke was pulled from the room, watching the scene from afar, his heart pounding. "He'll be okay, he'll be okay," Luke repeated to himself, trying to believe it. Hours passed, and finally, the doctor came out of the room with a grave look. "We're doing our best, but the situation is critical. We must prepare for the worst." The words fell like a bomb. Luke felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Desperate, he looked at Mary. "What will I do without him? He's all I have left." Mary held Luke firmly. "No matter what happens, you are not alone." And so, as the night wore on, Luke felt on the edge of an abyss. The fight to save his grandfather became more desperate with each passing moment, and the despair consumed him. But even in the face of adversity, a small flame of hope persisted, kept alive by love and the determination to never give up. Luke, exhausted and desperate, continued his search for help. He positioned himself in front of a busy supermarket, hoping the generosity of strangers could provide some relief. With an anxious look, he watched people come and go, holding a makeshift sign that read, "Please help, my grandpa is sick." As he begged for help, Luke spotted a woman with brown hair and glasses pushing a shopping cart. He felt a chill as he recognized her. "Helena!" he called out, his voice trembling. The woman turned, surprised to hear her name. "Luke? My God, is that you?" replied Helena, her eyes widening in shock. She abandoned her cart and ran to the boy, kneeling to his level. "What happened? Where is your grandpa?" "He's in the hospital. He's very sick and we need help," Luke explained, fighting back tears. Helena looked around, grasping the severity of the situation. "Come on, let's go to him now," she said, taking Luke's hand and leading him to her car. "I didn't know what had happened to you since Alfred's death. He was my best friend since childhood. Why didn't you come to me?" "We didn't know where to go. Things got very hard. I didn't know how to find people," replied Luke, feeling a mix of relief and shame. On the way to the hospital, Helena asked for more details, and Luke told her everything, from being thrown out of the house to the struggles on the streets. When they arrived at the hospital, Helena went straight to the reception desk, explaining who she was and asking to see Anthony. When they finally reached the room, Anthony was lying down, weak and pale, but conscious. Seeing Helena, his eyes filled with tears. "Helena, is it really you?" "My honorary daughter," he murmured weakly. "Yes, Anthony, it's me. I just found out what happened. I'm going to help you, I promise," said Helena, holding Anthony's hand tenderly. "You're going to be okay. We'll get through this together." In the following days, Helena met Mary and thanked her profusely for her help before taking charge of the situation. She spoke with the doctors, arranged for the necessary medications, and ensured Anthony received the best possible treatment. "You saved our lives," said Luke, hugging her with gratitude. "No, Luke, you are like family to me." "I'll never let you go through this alone again," replied Helena emotionally. Helena's presence brought new energy to Luke and Anthony. With her support, things began to improve. Anthony, although still weak, showed signs of recovery, and Luke finally felt a bit of hope. As days passed, the bond between Helena, Luke, and Anthony grew stronger, uniting them in a new family dynamic. Luke's strength and courage, combined with Helena's love and dedication, created an atmosphere of hope and renewal. Thus, the unexpected reunion with Helena marked a turning point in the lives of Luke and Anthony, proving that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope can shine through kindness and true love. The days in the hospital were slow and filled with recovery, but with Helena's constant presence, Anthony and Luke began to feel a glimmer of renewed hope. One day, as Luke sat by his grandfather's bedside, Helena entered the room with a warm smile. "Luke, Anthony, I have a proposal for you," she began, sitting next to Luke. "I want you both to come live with me. I have plenty of space, and you won't have to worry about where to sleep or what to eat anymore." Anthony, still weak, looked at Helena with gratitude. "Helena, you've already done so much for us. We don't want to be a burden." Helena smiled, holding Anthony's hand. "You would never be a burden. We're practically family, and family takes care of each other. Besides, my house has been very empty. It would be nice to have company." Luke looked at Helena with bright eyes. "Are you serious, Helena? We can really live with you." "Of course, Luke. You and your grandpa deserve a safe and comfortable place to start over, and I want to help you get that." With Anthony's consent, Helena began arranging everything for them to move in as soon as Anthony was discharged. In the following days, she brought new clothes, nutritious food, and even some toys for Luke. "We'll make this place feel like home for you," she said, helping Luke pack their belongings. When the day of Anthony's discharge finally arrived, Helena was there ready to take them to her home. "Welcome to your new home," she said, opening the door to her cozy house. Luke looked around, amazed at the spacious and well-decorated home. "Helena, this is incredible." "Thank you so much," said Luke, hugging her tightly. Anthony, still supported by a cane, looked around with an emotional smile. "Helena, you've given us a new chance. I don't know how we can ever thank you." "Seeing you both well is more than enough," replied Helena with tears in her eyes. That night, they all sat together for a homemade meal. Anthony, though still weak, felt rejuvenated by the warm and welcoming atmosphere. Luke, sitting next to Helena, couldn't stop smiling. "Now let's start rebuilding our lives. We'll do this together," said Helena, raising her glass in a toast. Luke and Anthony's lives began to change rapidly under Helena's care. In the first few days in their new home, they felt the difference that love and stability could make. Helena ensured Anthony had all the necessary medications and treatments, while Luke received special attention to get back to his studies. "Luke, we're going to enroll you in the neighborhood school. It's a good school, and you'll make new friends," said Helena one morning as she prepared breakfast. Luke, with a shy smile, nodded. "Thank you, Helena. I'm nervous, but I want to go back to school." Over time, Anthony began to regain his strength. Regular doctor visits, healthy food, and a peaceful environment worked wonders. "I feel stronger every day." "Helena, you saved us," said Anthony, holding her hand with gratitude. "You had that strength within you all along. I just helped bring it out. But I will help you get your lives back, don't worry," replied Helena, smiling. The routine at Helena's house brought a sense of normalcy that Luke and Anthony had lost. Luke, in his school uniform, left every morning with a sparkle in his eyes. He quickly made friends and started excelling in his classes. "Aunt Helena, I got top marks in math," exclaimed Luke one day when he came home. "I'm so proud of you, Luke," she replied, hugging him. Anthony, on the other hand, found purpose in small activities. He helped Helena with the garden and got involved in community projects. "It's good to feel useful again," said Anthony, admiring the flowers they had planted together. One afternoon while they were in the garden, Anthony turned to Luke. "Are you happy, my grandson?" he asked with a loving expression. Luke smiled widely. "Yes, Grandpa. Since Dad's death, I never thought we could have a life like this again. I still cry sometimes missing him." Helena, hearing the conversation, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "You both deserve this. Everyone deserves a second chance." Time passed, and Helena's house transformed into a true home for Luke and Anthony. "Grandpa, I was thinking, what do you think about starting a small gardening project? We could sell the flowers at the local market," suggested Luke, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Anthony smiled, feeling invigorated by the idea. "That's a great idea, Luke. Let's do it together." As time passed, Helena began to realize that there was more to Luke and Anthony's story than they were willing to share. The way Luke spoke about his uncle Simon and how Anthony avoided mentioning his son raised suspicions in her mind. One night while they were having tea in the living room, Helena decided to approach the subject delicately. "Anthony, Luke, I've noticed you avoid talking about Simon. If you feel comfortable, I'd like to understand better what happened." Anthony sighed deeply, looking at Luke before beginning to speak. "Helena, Simon kicked us out of the house. He was under a lot of pressure and he believed that getting rid of us would solve his problems. He felt that he was never loved and had a lot of envy towards Alfred. The loss of Luke's father was the last straw for him to show his true colors." Luke added, "He was always distant and kind of angry with me, and he was always fighting with my dad. After my dad died, he just couldn't take it anymore. I never understood why he acted that way." Helena listened attentively, the concern growing in her heart. "This is very serious. You deserve justice for what you've been through. I know some lawyers who can help us investigate the situation and ensure Simon is held accountable." The next day, Helena contacted her friend Carl, a renowned lawyer specializing in family cases. "Carl, I have an urgent and delicate situation. Can you come to my house to talk?" Carl agreed immediately, recognizing the urgency in Helena's voice. When Carl arrived, Helena, Anthony, and Luke told him the whole story, from the fights with Anthony's late wife and the conflicts with Alfred to the expulsion and the difficult days on the streets. "We need to understand the legality of what Simon did and see how we can ensure this doesn't happen again," Helena explained. Carl frowned as he took notes. What Simon did could be characterized as abandonment of a vulnerable person and mistreatment, especially considering Anthony's condition and Luke's age. Not to mention that the house legally belongs to Luke now. We need to gather evidence and witnesses who can corroborate this story. In the following days, Carl began investigating the case. He interviewed neighbors, former colleagues of Anthony, and even some friends of Alfred and Simon. The information he gathered painted a clear picture of neglect and abuse. "We have a solid case here, Helena. We can move forward and ensure Simon is held accountable for his actions, but without a confession, it will be very bureaucratic and may take some time," Carl said determinedly. As the lawyer prepared for the legal proceedings, Helena, Luke, and Anthony prepared to confront Simon. "You are strong and brave. Don't let fear stop you from seeking justice. For the memory you have of Alfred, promise you will seek justice," Helena encouraged. Helena decided to try and get a confession from Simon and went to his house. Simon was surprised to see Helena at his door. "What do you want here?" he said. "I came to tell you that your father and nephew are with me. I don't know what you did or why the two of them would leave Alfred's house, but I'm here to tell you it's never too late to regret your mistakes. I'll fight for them." "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Helena replied. Simon looked scared but ashamed and regretful. "Tell me where your house is. I'll go to them and apologize for my actions personally." Helena nodded and gave him the address. Simon showed up at Helena's house the next day, looking nervous but determined. Anthony and Luke were there, waiting anxiously. As Simon entered the room, he saw the hurt in his father's eyes and the sadness in Luke's. He took a deep breath and spoke. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was wrong, and I let my anger and jealousy control me. I'm truly sorry for what I did. I want to make things right." Anthony, though still weak, looked at his son with a mixture of pain and hope. "Simon, it will take time to heal the wounds you caused, but this is a start. We need to rebuild our trust." Luke, holding his grandfather's hand, looked at Simon. "I don't understand why you did what you did, but if you're really sorry, we can try to move forward." Simon nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you. I will do whatever it takes to make amends." With Helena's support, the family began the long process of healing and rebuilding their relationships. Carl continued with the legal proceedings to ensure their rights were protected, and Simon worked hard to regain their trust and prove his remorse was genuine. Through perseverance, love, and the willingness to forgive, they started to create a new beginning, where hope and redemption were possible. One evening, while talking in the living room, Luke shared his plans with Helena and Anthony. "Aunt Helena, Grandpa, I've decided that I want to study more and also start working. I want to help improve our life and ensure a better future for all of us," said Luke, determination shining in his eyes. Helena smiled, proud of the young boy. "Luke, that's wonderful. You are very brave and determined. We'll support you in everything you need." In the following days, Luke dedicated himself to his studies with renewed energy. He spent hours in the library, engrossed in books, determined to make up for lost time. "I'm understanding so much more now, Aunt Helena. The teachers say I'm doing well," he said excitedly. "You're doing an incredible job, Luke. Keep it up and you'll go far," replied Helena, encouraging him. Besides studying, Luke decided to look for a job he could do after school. Walking around the neighborhood, he noticed a small car wash. Maybe they need some help, he thought. Gathering his courage, he walked in and introduced himself to the owner, a middle-aged man named Joseph. "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Luke, and I'm looking for a job to help my family. Can I work here as a helper?" he asked politely. Joseph looked at the young boy, impressed by his attitude. "You've got spirit, kid. We need someone to help with washing cars. The work is tough, but if you're willing, the job is yours." "I'm willing to work hard, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity," replied Luke, feeling a weight lifted off his shoulders. In the first days of work, Luke dedicated himself completely. He learned to wash, wax, and polish cars with care and precision. "You're doing very well, Luke. Keep this up, and you'll have a bright future," praised Joseph. Returning home after a day's work, Luke shared his experiences with Helena and Anthony. "Today I managed to save a bit of my salary. We'll use it to help with household expenses," he said proudly. Anthony, feeling emotional, hugged his grandson. "You are an example of strength and determination, Luke. I'm very proud of you." Weeks passed, and Luke continued to balance his studies and work masterfully. Each day was another step towards the future he desired. Helena, seeing Luke's progress, couldn't help but feel emotional. "You are building something incredible, Luke. Never forget how capable you are." And so, motivated by Helena's help and his grandfather's love, Luke paved a path of success and dignity. He knew the future was uncertain, but with his determination and his family's support, he was confident he could overcome any obstacle. The days passed, and life began to take a more stable turn for Luke and Anthony, thanks to Helena's constant support. However, fate had one more surprise in store. Simon, after receiving the legal notification following Helena's visit, felt the weight of his actions. He started to reflect on his past mistakes and the distance he had created with his family. He wanted to fix things before they got worse for him. One afternoon, Helena was in the garden when she heard footsteps at the entrance. Looking up, she saw Simon standing there, with an expression of regret and uncertainty. "Helena, I need to talk to Luke and Anthony," he said, his voice trembling. Helena, though skeptical, saw the sincerity in Simon's eyes. "They are here, Simon, but know that your actions have caused a lot of pain. I hope you are prepared to face that." Simon nodded, feeling the weight of his guilt. Helena led him to the living room where Luke and Anthony were talking. Seeing Simon, the room fell silent. Luke tensed, remembering the painful past, while Anthony observed him with sad eyes. "Grandpa, what is he doing here?" asked Luke, his voice low but filled with emotion. Simon stepped forward, hesitant. "Luke, Anthony, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm here to try. I made many mistakes, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix them." Anthony, feeling the weight of Simon's words, took a deep breath. "Simon, what you did hurt us deeply. How could you have the courage to do that?" Luke, still wary, crossed his arms. "Why now? After everything we've been through, why are you showing up only now?" Simon, with tears in his eyes, replied, "I was blinded by my own pain and frustration. I realized too late how much you both mean to me. Helena helped me see that." Helena, watching the scene, decided to intervene. "Simon, you need to show with actions, not just words, that you're willing to change. Luke and Anthony deserve that." Simon nodded. "I want to prove to you that I can be better. I can start by helping in any way I can. I want to be a part of your lives again if you'll let me." Anthony looked at Luke, seeking his grandson's approval. "Luke, what do you think? Are you willing to give him a chance?" Luke, struggling with his emotions, looked at Simon and then at his grandfather. "I don't know, Grandpa. I'll never forget what he did." Simon, feeling a spark of hope, approached Luke. "I promise I won't disappoint you. I'll do everything I can to repair what I broke." Luke hesitated, the pain of the past still fresh in his mind. "Actions speak louder than words, Simon. If you really mean it, you'll have to prove it." Simon nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I will, Luke. I will prove it every day. Thank you for giving me this chance." With a renewed sense of purpose, Simon began to integrate himself back into the family. He started by helping around the house and working with Luke on his gardening project. Slowly, through consistent effort and genuine remorse, he began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. As days turned into weeks, Simon's presence became a source of stability rather than tension. Anthony and Luke started to see the changes in him and began to open their hearts to the possibility of forgiveness. Helena, observing the transformation, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "You've all come a long way. I'm proud of each one of you," she said during one of their family dinners. Luke, looking at his uncle, finally felt a glimmer of acceptance. "We're giving you a chance, Simon. Don't waste it." Simon, grateful for their trust, replied, "I won't, Luke. I promise to make things right." And so, with determination and a lot of hard work, the family began to heal, proving that even the deepest wounds could mend with time, effort, and unconditional love. After much discussion and tears, Simon left, and Helena knew it was time to intervene in their feelings. What he did was unforgivable. Alfred would never accept this. "If you really loved Alfred, help me expose Simon." The reunion with Simon and Helena's determined talk brought a whirlwind of emotions for Luke and Anthony. The following days were tense. One Saturday afternoon, while Helena was out handling personal matters, Simon decided it was time for an honest conversation. "Luke, Anthony, can we talk?" Simon asked, his voice serious. Luke looked at his grandfather, who nodded, and then they all sat in the living room. Simon took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I know my actions caused a lot of suffering, and I want you to know that I'm sorry. But we need to talk about what really happened." Luke, feeling the anger and pain rising to the surface, responded firmly. "You kicked us out of our home, my dad's house. You left us with nothing. How can you expect us to just forget that?" Simon nodded, understanding the intensity of Luke's words. "You have every right to feel that way. I was lost, frustrated with life, and I took it out on you. It wasn't fair." Anthony, who had been silent until then, decided to intervene. "Simon, I never understood why you made that decision, yelling at me, cursing, but I always thought there might be an explanation." Simon lowered his head, feeling consumed by shame. I was scared of failing, scared of not being able to support everyone. The pressure was immense, and I let anger and frustration take over. But that doesn't justify what I did. Simon looked directly at Luke, his eyes full of regret. I didn't know how to ask for help. I've always felt inferior, like I could never fill the void left by Alfred's death. And I ended up isolating myself, creating a chasm between us. Anthony, with a trembling voice, said, "Simon, we were always a family, even with all our faults, and family should stick together, especially in difficult times. In the worst moment of my life, you threw me out." Silence hung in the room as each person processed the revelations. Simon, with tears streaming down his face, finally spoke, "I just want a chance to make up for what I did. I know it won't be easy, and that maybe you can never fully forgive me. But I'm willing to try, if you'll let me." Luke, still struggling with his feelings, looked at his grandfather. Anthony placed a hand on Luke's shoulder, offering him strength and support. "The decision is yours, Luke. But know that I'm here, no matter what you decide." Luke took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within him. "For my dad's memory, I want to believe you can change, Simon. But it will take time. We need to see actions, not just words." Simon nodded, understanding the depth of Luke's words. "I'll prove to you that I can change, and I'll do it one day at a time." The conversation ended, but the words exchanged left a mark on everyone. In the days that followed, Simon made a conscious effort to show his commitment to change. He started by helping around the house, fixing things that needed repair, and joining in on family activities. His actions spoke louder than words, and slowly Anthony and Luke began to see the sincerity in his efforts. Helena, who had been observing the changes, decided to have another talk with Simon. "You've made a good start, Simon, but remember, trust takes time to rebuild. Keep showing them you're serious." Simon nodded, grateful for Helena's support. "I will. I know I have a long way to go, but I won't give up." As the weeks passed, the tension in the household began to ease. Luke focused on his studies and his job at the car wash, finding a sense of normalcy and purpose. Anthony, with Helena's support, continued to regain his strength and participate in family activities. One evening after dinner, Simon approached Luke. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance." Luke looked at Simon, his expression softening slightly. "I appreciate the effort you're making. Just don't let us down." Simon nodded, a sense of determination in his eyes. "I won't, Luke. I promise." With time, the family dynamics began to shift. Simon's presence became a source of stability rather than tension. He continued to prove his commitment through actions, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. Helena, seeing the progress, felt a sense of hope. "You've all come a long way. I'm proud of each one of you," she said during one of their family dinners. Luke, looking at his uncle, finally felt a glimmer of acceptance. "We're giving you a chance, Simon. Don't waste it." Simon, grateful for their trust, replied, "I won't, Luke. I promise to make things right." Through perseverance, love, and the willingness to forgive, the family began to heal, proving that even the deepest wounds could mend with time, effort, and unconditional love. The following weeks were a period of intense reflection for Simon. The conversations with Luke and Anthony had reopened old wounds and awakened a deep regret in his heart. Each day was a battle against the guilt and the desire to make amends for the past. Simon spent hours sitting by the edge of his bed, thinking about the crucial moments that led to his estrangement from the family. He remembered the lonely nights, the anger that grew within him, and the harsh words he had spoken. "How could I have been so blind?" he murmured to himself, the weight of remorse almost unbearable. One day, he decided he needed to do more than just reflect. He sought out Helena. "Helena, can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice soft but laden with emotion. "Of course, Simon, sit down," she replied with an encouraging smile. Simon took a deep breath before beginning. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about what I did to Anthony and Luke, and I feel a deep regret. I don't know if I can ever fix the damage I've caused, but I'm determined to try." Helena paused for a moment and looked at Simon with understanding. The first step is recognizing your mistakes, and they were very serious, Simon. I'm not sure if this can ever be fully repaired, but now you need to show through actions that you are changing. Simon nodded, feeling a slight wave of hope. I want to do more for them. I want to be present, to really help, but I'm afraid they will never be able to forgive me. Forgiveness takes time, Simon. It's something you will have to earn. But I believe that with patience and effort you can make a difference, said Helena, placing a hand on his shoulder. That night, Simon joined Anthony and Luke in the living room. I'd like to talk to you if you can listen, he began, nervous. Anthony and Luke agreed, allowing him to continue. I know my words may not mean much now, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry for the suffering I caused. I want to change. I want to be a better person, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you. Luke looked at Simon, still with some distrust. What do you intend to do? I want to help. I want to be here for you. Whether it's working in the garden, helping with household chores, or simply being present. I want to rebuild our relationship, step by step, Simon replied. Anthony, feeling the sincerity in Simon's words, decided to give him a chance. Let's see how things unfold, Simon. We're willing to try. In the days that followed, Simon began to get more involved in daily activities. He helped in the garden and spent more time talking with Anthony. Each small gesture was an attempt to repair the past and build a better future. Simon started waking up early to help prepare breakfast and assist with the chores around the house. He made sure to be present and attentive, showing through his actions that he was committed to changing. He also began spending more time with Luke, helping him with his schoolwork and listening to his thoughts and feelings. One afternoon, while working in the garden, Simon and Luke planted a new flower bed together. It was a symbolic act, representing the growth and healing they were trying to nurture in their relationship. These flowers will remind us of our efforts to rebuild, Simon said, his voice filled with hope. Luke, though still cautious, appreciated Simon's efforts. I can see you're trying, Simon. It's not easy, but I'm willing to give this a chance, he admitted, his voice softer. Anthony, observing the growing bond between Simon and Luke, felt a sense of relief. He joined them in the garden, working side by side with his son and grandson. This is what family is about, supporting each other, even when it's difficult, he said, smiling. As weeks turned into months, Simon's consistent efforts began to bear fruit. The tension in the household eased, and moments of genuine connection started to emerge. Simon's presence became a source of support rather than a reminder of past pain. Helena, witnessing the transformation, felt a deep sense of pride in the family. You've all come such a long way. It's not easy, but you're doing it, she said one evening during a family dinner. Luke, looking at his uncle, finally felt a glimmer of trust. Simon, I see that you're changing. It's not just words anymore. Thank you for trying. Simon, grateful for their willingness to forgive, replied, Thank you for giving me this chance. I promise to keep working hard to make things right. Through determination, love, and the willingness to forgive, the family continued to heal. They proved that even the deepest wounds could mend with time, effort, and unconditional love, creating a stronger bond than ever before. The days of reconciliation and hard work began to blend with growing tension. Helena, always protective of Luke and Anthony, knew that Simon's actions could not go unpunished. While she acknowledged his remorse, she felt that justice needed to be served. Thus, she made a difficult but necessary decision. One evening, while everyone was gathered in the living room, Helena called Simon for a conversation. Simon, we need to talk about what happened. We need closure for all of this, she said firmly. Simon, unaware of Helena's intentions, agreed. Of course, Helena, I'm willing to talk about everything. I want everything to be clear between us. Helena discreetly activated a hidden recorder on the table. Simon, tell us exactly what happened that day when you kicked Anthony and Luke out of the house. If possible, include what led you to do it. I want to know every detail, the words said, to understand the situation better. They know everything, but I don't. I've heard their side, but I want to hear it from you. Simon took a deep breath, looking at Luke and Anthony. I was under a lot of pressure, feeling incapable of handling everything. Frustration and anger took over me. I know I was wrong to yell and curse. Kicking you out was the worst decision of my life. I acted cruelly and selfishly, and I can't apologize enough for that. Helena kept the conversation focused. And what about the mistreatment, Simon? We need the truth. Simon, with tears in his eyes, continued. I know I was verbally abusive and my behavior was unacceptable. I made Anthony and Luke suffer, and that's something I'll have to carry for the rest of my life. After the conversation, Simon felt a weight lift off his shoulders, unaware that he had just provided a crucial confession. Helena, remaining calm, discreetly ended the recording. Thank you for being honest, Simon. We all needed to hear this. The next day, Helena took the recording to her lawyer friend, Carl. Carl, I have something you need to hear. It's about Simon and what he did to Anthony and Luke. Carl listened to the recording attentively, his face growing serious. Helena, this is incriminating. We have enough to file a case against Simon for assault, mistreatment, and abandonment, not to mention the illegal eviction of the rightful homeowner. With the evidence in hand, Carl took the necessary legal steps. A few days later, while Simon was talking with Anthony, the police were notified and arrived at Helena's house. Simon, surprised and confused, was taken into custody. Simon Smith, you are under arrest for assault and mistreatment of an elderly person and a minor, as well as illegal eviction, the officer declared while handcuffing Simon. Anthony and Luke watched the scene with mixed feelings. Anthony, with tears in his eyes, said, Simon, I hope this helps you find redemption. I don't wish you harm, but justice needs to be done. Luke, holding his grandfather's hand, murmured, I hope he understands how much he hurt us. Helena, feeling the weight of her decision, knew she had done what was necessary. She hugged Luke and Anthony, promising that she would always be there to protect them. As Simon was taken away, he looked at his family one last time, hoping that one day he could truly redeem himself. Simon's arrest marked a crucial point in everyone's lives, bringing a sense of justice and a new beginning, although a painful one. With Simon imprisoned and justice finally served, a new chapter began in the lives of Luke and Anthony. The house that had once been the scene of so much pain and suffering was reclaimed, now becoming a symbol of renewal and hope. Helena, always by their side, became an essential figure in rebuilding their lives. Shortly after Simon's arrest, Helena suggested a thorough cleaning of the house, both physically and emotionally. Let's turn this place into a real home where you can feel safe and happy, she said, with an encouraging smile. Luke and Anthony agreed, feeling that this was an opportunity for a new beginning. In the following weeks, they worked together to renovate the house. They painted the walls, replaced the furniture, and planted a beautiful garden. Each small change represented a victory, a step forward in building a better future. One afternoon, while working in the garden, Luke looked at Helena and Anthony. I never thought we could have a life like this again. I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me. Anthony, wiping the sweat from his forehead, smiled. You are the reason we are here, Luke. Your courage and determination brought us to this point. Helena, watching the two, felt a deep satisfaction. You deserve all of this, and much more. Let's keep working together to ensure our future is bright. At work, Luke earned the trust of Joseph, the owner of the car wash. You have a natural talent for this, kid. If you keep this up, you could have a great future here, Joseph said, while teaching Luke how to polish a luxury car. At home, the evenings were filled with conversations about the day, laughter, and plans for the future. Anthony, now healthier and more energetic, began teaching Luke about gardening and small home repairs. These are useful skills, Luke. You never know when you might need them, Anthony said with a proud sparkle in his eyes. Helena continued to be the pillar of emotional support. She encouraged Luke and Anthony to move forward, to pursue their dreams, and to never give up. The past doesn't define who we are. What matters is what we do from now on, she said, inspiring them every day. Over time, the house transformed into a true home. Luke, Anthony, and Helena became more united, overcoming adversity and building a future together. Simon's imprisonment, though painful, had been a necessary step for everyone to move forward. On a quiet evening, while watching a movie in the living room, Luke looked around and felt a deep peace. We're together, and that's all that matters, he thought, holding his grandfather's hand. Anthony, noticing the look of contentment on Luke's face, smiled. "You're right, my grandson. We're together, and that's what makes us strong." And so, with love, dedication, and the strength of a united family, Luke, Anthony, and Helena moved forward, determined to build a future filled with happiness and achievements. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I would love to hear your perspective. Thank you.